So let's now bring in the couple who spotted the stranded passengers and helped with the rescue. Brian Angus and Dorothy Stauffer join us now. It is an incredible story, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about it and describe for us, first of all, that moment. You're sailing from Vancouver to back to one of the islands, I guess, in the Gulf, right? And then all of a sudden, what do you spot in the water?
Yes, good evening. Yes, I'm Brian Angus. We were under sail and under power. We're on our way to Active Pass, where all the ferries go through. And we're always watching for debris in the water. It's not good to run into a log. And I looked on the starboard side, the right-hand side, only 5 feet away from my hull. There was a person in the water, and then a second and a third. And all they could say was help, very quietly. So I immediately told Dorothy, and I immediately picked up my mic and called Victoria Coast Guard on Channel 16, declared Mayday, which would then, I knew, put them into action. Gave them our position as Dorothy brought in the sail. There's no way we could turn around and pick them up. So we turned around and headed towards, and as you've said, and I only say this, so I'm a retired Air Canada captain. Dorothy is currently employed as a service director. We both have over 37 years. So now this was Dorothy's job, because I had to drive the boat and we did not need two people yelling at these people. So Dorothy, go ahead.
Well, once I lowered the sail and we circled back, I also said to Brian, I see 5 people in the water after he said 3. And we went to the closest 3 and I started to give directions, strong commands, which is part of my training. We shout commands to direct people around in an emergency, and I commanded to the woman, swim to the dinghy and try to climb in. There's a floating line, grab it. And she was still saying help, but I kept yelling, swim to the dinghy, and she finally did. And then I would direct Brian to turn around, circle back to retrieve the next person, and it was a male who was floating on his back, spread eagle, face up, no shirt on. It appeared he had lost his clothing in the water, waist up. And I started commanding him, yelling at him, swim to the dinghy, grab the line. He was responsive, but not as quick. I felt that the hypothermia was setting in. And once he hung on to the dinghy, we went back for the next fellow, and he was much more difficult to get him to react, because I think he was to the point of not being able to understand what I was saying. So I started using charades and motions to get him to the dinghy, which he finally did. It was distressing simply because they did not have life jackets on.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody who's spoken about this, including the head of the Joint Rescue Command, wants to stress the point that you need to have life vests on when you're in the water. I assume you guys did on your sailboat.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, always.
And it's the law. And we do it for our own safety and the safety around us. So it took almost 18 minutes to get these people, after we spotted them, to get them to hold on to the dinghy. And the hovercraft arrived almost at that time and picked them out of the water. And it was a most distressing situation to realize that these people could have died if we hadn't been there, and would have, because there were no boats around us. There was nothing within 15 miles. I can see that on my radar and my AIS. There were no one around. So, but I can tell you, when we declared the emergency, everybody came.
There were 2 BC ferries, a Hello ferry, another sailboat came along, and all the RCMP and search and rescue marine vessels were there. It was incredible.
Helicopters.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brian, it was your Mayday, Brian. Is the only Mayday that was called, right? The boat, no one on that boat managed to get a call out. And so had you two not spotted those people in the water, I talked to the Joint Rescue Command that they believe that it wouldn't have been until this boat was overdue that a call would have gone out, and that clearly would have been too late. Either one of you can answer this question. Given your long careers in aviation and your long time as mariners, have you seen anything? Have you been in any kind of situation in your lives that come close to what happened yesterday?
For me, as the pilot who sits up front while Dorothy looks after the passengers, my emergencies were all technical, and there weren't very many in 37 years. But on the water, no, I've never seen it. Dorothy can answer the question. She's had some situations in the air, but not on the water.
As Brian said, yes, I've had a few incidents in flight and over the last 37 years, but certainly nothing on the water like this.
Dorothy, perhaps you'd like to talk about your 3 commands.
Yeah, and so my flight attendant training, I think, is what really helped me deal with how to corral these folks. But we have something in our training called the 3 A's, and it's assess, adapt, and then act. So I had to assess the situation, adapt to how we were going to circle around them, and then act by getting out there and commanding them to swim to the dinghy. The dinghy for me was their life ring, because there was no way, no how I could throw a life ring off our boat because it was so choppy.
And there was no way, if anybody's wondering who's a boater out there, we could not bring them aboard. The seas were too heavy, and they were physically could not help us. And I was not prepared to risk Dorothy to get in the dinghy. And it worked out for the 3 people we got. And, I feel we made the right choices. And they were very lucky, and we were very lucky to be there.
So they almost were to the end of their ability to communicate or even stay afloat, and then you managed to get them to hang on 18 minutes, right? And then, as you point out, I guess the Coast Guard came in. So how did they eventually get pulled to safety?
Well, I kept driving the boat. So
I watched it. Because they had asked Brian to pull forward slowly so that they could reach our dinghy, and basically the search and rescue, or the Coast Guard people, they jumped into the water in full gear, wet gear, I guess, and attached to the hovercraft, and basically retrieved the 2 men out of the water. And the female victim, she actually managed to climb into the dinghy, so they popped her out of the dinghy and onto the hovercraft.
I understand that they were not able to communicate much meaningful to you, and so you don't know what happened. But maybe I'll ask each of you a question individually so you know who I'm directing this to. Dorothy, over the last 24 hours, you must be thinking a lot about all of this, about how close you guys came to not seeing anybody, about how instrumental you were in saving these lives, about how you couldn't respond to all 5 people, and that there were others as well that you never saw. Like, Dorothy, what are your thoughts today?
Well, I didn't sleep a lot, and I thought a lot about it throughout the night, replayed it in my mind quite often. I'm grateful that we showed up when we did. I'm devastated for the 2 we couldn't find after we managed to secure the 3 people on our dinghy. We were unaware of any others. I did call out to the woman and ask how many, and she said 8, but it was unbeknownst to me that there were many more that were in the water. I saw 5 heads floating around in the water when Brian first mentioned that he could see people in the water. I saw 5 heads bobbing in the water.
Yeah. And Brian, your thoughts more than 24 hours later?
Still bothers me, no question at all. The search and rescue people, SARS, RCMP, and the Canadian Coast Guard have all reached out to offer assistance, to talk to people, which we will take advantage of. To see this happen when it wasn't necessary, in the sense that, yes, the boat went down somehow, but the fact that they weren't wearing life jackets, that bothers me more than anything else. But I am so happy
that we managed to save 3 lives.
That we were there at the right time.
It is an incredible story, and I want to make it really clear to the people who are watching that you didn't reach out to us. We've reached out to you. You know, we want you to tell this story because there's so much about it that's important. The message about life jackets, but also the message about clear commands, about, you know, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And though 6 people lost their lives here, you guys were instrumental in saving some. So Brian Angus, Dorothy Stauffer, thank you very much for speaking with us, and thank you very much for what you did yesterday.
Thank you for
Ian.
having us.
We appreciate it very much.